long way from Genesis chapter 1. But we're now dealing with the subject of Jacob, and he's over in Hayden Aram, which is the territory where they had been there to start with, maybe 100 years earlier. But he'd been sent back by his dad to find a wife. Isaac wanted Jacob to have a wife, and he didn't want her to marry a Hittite. So he sent Jacob over there, and back where the family was, Laban, Rachel, Leah. We get into that particular story in Genesis 30. But notice that they're just about to meet. Jacob has now arrived back where his ancestors were, and the story gets to be rather intriguing now. He sees Rachel, but at this time he doesn't realize that he's going to be marrying Rachel, at least this juncture in time. But he proceeds to give water to the sheep. She's serving as a shepherdess. And so people with, I don't know how many people with different flocks come to this watering hole to water their stock. And that's what Jacob is doing. And he rolls the big stone back where they can have access to the well. I guess I don't know, I'd like to see a picture of that well, see just why it was so difficult to move that stone. He moved it by himself, and he's getting on up there in years. But he is a man, he's not just a boy. Some of the young men were there with their flocks to be watered, and they said, we can't roll. Jacob said, why aren't you busy? I mean, in other words, he's sort of scolding them for their laziness. Why aren't you busy and watering the flock? Well, we can't move the stone till it's time when all the boys get here, and then we'll move it. It takes more than just one. Well, it didn't. You see, Jacob moves it. He starts watering the flock that belongs to Rachel. Notice that, now I wanted to get into verse 10. Let's read that. Genesis 29, verse 10. I want you to notice how many times this one phrase is used. Now, there's got to be a reason for that. Moses, I believe, is the one writing material down by inspiration from God, but it's interesting to note this phrase is found 3 times in one verse. It came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, number 1, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, number 2, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother, number 3. Why mention that 3 times in a very short period of time? We know the first time that Laban was a mother brother. Why mention that he's Rebekah's brother? Of course, it's conjecture. The Bible doesn't tell us, but it's probably likely that it's mentioned 3 times here because it is important. It's not just Rachel. It is Rachel and somebody else that's important. Laban, Rachel's dad. Now, why is that important? Remember, here's a fellow with he'd come to look for a companion to marry, and how's he going to be supporting himself? He doesn't know anybody there. So he arrives, and he'll be looking around for somebody to offer him a place to stay, to sleep at night. He's going to be looking for a job. And it appears that this is probably the reason that this is mentioned 3 times. Laban is mentioned 3 times because Rachel wasn't the only important one here. He's going to have to strike up some kind of a close relationship, and it's going to be with his mom, Rebekah's brother, Laban, his uncle Laban. Okay, now, notice how it progresses. After he watered the flock, verse 10, verse 11 says, and Jacob kissed Rachel. Now, he hasn't even met Rachel until right now. This is not a personal kiss because of a loving relationship. What is it? This is just the well-known quick peck, both sides of the cheek type thing that was very, very expected, habitual in that country. So but it may have given her some pause. I mean, this guy's a stranger. He doesn't know me. What's he doing welcoming me, giving me a kiss? Well, Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son. So he is a relative. He's making that known. And then he said in particular, he was Rebekah's boy. Well, Laban is bound to have been talking about his family relationship, his sister Rebekah, his dad Isaac, and so on, for all these years, but Jacob had never met these people. They had never met Jacob. So now he gives her a welcoming kiss, tells her who he is, and I don't know, it may be that he was choked up emotionally, but he wasn't the only one. Look at her emotional response. It came to pass that when she found out, she ran and told her dad, guess who I just talked to, Daddy? It is your nephew. It is Rebekah's boy. And so it came to pass when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him, and he brought him to the house, and he told Laban all these things. You just let your mind wander. But I would assume that what we've got going here, when the case of Laban's, probably some 70 years has transpired. Anyway, Rachel, after learning that this is my dad's relative, nephew, she runs and tells her dad, Laban, about who has been watering the stock for her, So it's now her turn to be emotional. She takes off and runs as fast as she can to tell Daddy, guess who I just visited with. Now remember, Rebecca and Laban separated from each other. Brother and sister separated from each other. Many, many years have passed. I don't know exactly how many, but probably 70 to 80 years have passed. She's bound to have heard, that is, Rachel is bound to her dad talk about his family. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's one of them, Jacob. And so they talk and talk and talk, probably. They got a lot to talk about. 60, 70 years had passed with very little contact, if any. They didn't have email in those days. They didn't even have Pony Express. They may have picked up some information from different groups passing by, riding their camels. But after all, that's 500 miles away. That's how far Jacob had come, 500 miles. And so Laban brought Jacob home, and no doubt they talked far into the night. And Jacob answering Laban's questions, well, how's your mom? And what about the other relatives, and what's their names, and how old are they now? If they're normal, that's what's going on. And so he's talking to him about it. It says, he told Laban, verse 13, he told Laban all these things. Well, that's going to take a long time. So Jacob was going to be helping with the family's business, primarily handling the flocks. Laban was quite prosperous. He was continuing to be that even after 20 years of Jacob working for him. He was still a very prosperous individual. But during this 20 years, and starting right now, he's working for Uncle Laban. It's interesting to think about, but this means that he's near Rachel nearly every day, probably. And he's noticing she's a lovely young lady and she's single. So he thinks to himself, maybe this is the one. So he'd been there a month. Look at verse 14. Laban said to Jacob, surely you're bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Your mom was my sister. And he abode with him for the space of a month. I underlined that because I wanted to ask a question. You ever have any relatives come and stay a month? That's a long time in our society today, but here what? Jacob stayed an entire month and of course worked for his uncle Laban. Well, that kept him near Rachel, who he often saw, probably visited with, perhaps began to flirt with her, but he's developing a relationship. After he'd been there a month, Uncle Laban offers him a job. Now notice verse 15 and 16, Genesis 29, verse 15. Laban said to Jacob, because you are my brother, or my relative, because you're related to my family, does that mean that you ought to serve me for nothing? You certainly deserve some pay for the work that you're doing. I don't want to take advantage of the fact that you are a relative. So tell me, verse 15 says, what do you want your wages to be? What do I owe you? Verse 16, Laban had 2 daughters. The older, Leah, the younger, Rachel. And Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. Rachel, the younger one, is the one that Jacob was interested in. So Dad now makes the request, please let me know how much it would take to get you to work for me full time. In other words, he is asking about him becoming a salaried employee. And he gets an answer. Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve thee. I'll work for you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. Now that's quite a deal. Free labor. 7 years of labor. And the cost to Daddy, Laban, would be the younger daughter. Well, at least that's what Jacob thought. We'll get to that in just a moment. But he has a problem, and that is, as we see later, verse 26. His daughters were well favored, but notice that they were past the age when young ladies were usually getting married. And so Laban has probably become very concerned about that fact. And notice that all of this is not free service from now on, because he's going to be giving up his daughter. But this was quite a windfall. This was a good deal for Laban. 7 years and no money exchanged hands. Just Laban gives his daughter in marriage, the younger daughter. Well, as you'll see, Laban has an explanation. The older daughter hadn't gotten married yet, and it was the custom, local custom in that area, that the younger daughter didn't get married before the older daughter. Now, that being the case, Leah was not married yet, and neither was the younger daughter married yet. Couldn't get married according to custom until the older daughter was married. So Laban should have explained that custom at the time of this proposal. He and Jacob were having a discussion. What do I owe you? He told him. 7 years of service is what he agreed upon, both of them. And he didn't tell him about the fact that the older daughter has to be married first. Why? Probably because he knew by this time that Jacob was a good worker, and he didn't want to lose him. So he just let it pass. Look at verse 20. And Jacob served, past tense. He served 7 years for Rachel. But he was so much in love, it just seemed like a few days. And Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife now. Let let's have the marriage take place. For I kept my part of the bargain. And Laban gathered together the men of the place, and he made a feast. There evidently a lot of festivities were carried on in that day, and this lasted for a long time. You read the same thing in the New Testament. When a marriage took place, all the festivities, the activities, the celebration went on for a week. Somebody had to pay for that. But anyway, that's what we've got going here. And it came to pass in the evening that Laban, so now it's dark, and he takes Leah, the older daughter, and brings her to Jacob. And they spend the night together, Jacob thinking that this was his wife, Rachel. How can that be? That it has to be awfully dark. Those two girls would have to have their voices very similar to each other. But anyway, Jacob didn't catch on. An interesting historical footnote. At the same time, verse 24 says, Laban, the dad, gave Leah her handmaid. So now she's turned over, and she is now their responsibility, no longer his. Her name is Zilpah. Her name comes up again a little bit later. Verse 25, it came to pass in the morning, now it's morning time, daylight, behold, it was Leah. It wasn't Rachel who he thought that he was getting married to, it was Leah. And of course, he's upset. Verse 25 says, he goes to Laban. I can imagine he's already made up his little speech that he's going to deliver to him and read him the riot act. What have you done to me? Did I not agree to 7 years for Rachel? Why have you beguiled me? Why have you played this trick on me? And Laban gives, I think, the weak excuse. Well, that's not the way it's done in our country. Verse 26, we don't give the younger before the older. So, I mean, this guy, he is thinking ahead. So, it lets you know a little bit about his, how much does he really care for and love and respect his son-in-law and also his nephew at the same time. But what kind of respect does he have to play that kind of a trick on him, a strategy on him? But that's the way that it fell. Now, there's a lot. When I was reading this, probably you've done the same thing. What's going on all this time in the heart, the mind of Rachel? She knows what's going. She knows that Leah is being used and put off on as being the substitute for her. Had she been persuaded? Maybe she'd been commanded by her daddy Laban. Here's my strategy, here's what I'm going to do, and you better go along with it. I don't know if that happened or not, but if she knew about it, and obviously she did, she participated in it. So how does she feel about all of this regarding Jacob? Well, it might have been a little difficult night for her, but I'll tell you who it was difficult for. It was a difficult night for Rachel. I'm supposed to be the one married to him. This is our honeymoon, the first night of our honeymoon. It was the wrong woman. It was my sister. So she's got to be in mental anguish. I doubt that she slept at all that night. But anyway, Leah becomes somewhat jealous of Rachel. Why? Because she knows that Jacob really loves Rachel and not her. And Dad could pull this shenanigan if he wants to, but it's going to cause problems between those two sisters. I mean, think about it. How are you going to react if you were in her situation? She was obedient to her dad in the deception, but I think she realized that it was wrong, that they tricked or beguiled Jacob. It may have been that she had developed feelings for Jacob, and they were very strong, possibly, and that she wanted him so much that she went along with it, forgetting about all the other considerations and problems it's going to cause. But anyway, it had to be a difficult night for her too, but not as bad as it was for Rachel. But that sets the stage for what's going to be happening for a number of years between Rachel, the younger daughter, and Leah. Now, before we get to that, I want you to think back. Can you think of a similar type of strategy that was used to beguile, to trick somebody? Well, I didn't have to think back very far, because you think immediately the similarity between the deception that was played by Isaac upon Jacob and Esau. Jacob participated in a deception. And now, watch the similarity. Here, Isaac thought that Jacob was Esau years earlier, gave him the blessing that was supposed to go to the oldest child, but it went to the younger. Now Jacob thought that Leah was Rachel. See the parallel? He thought that Rachel was Leah, but he took her to wife. In both cases, you've got deception being not only participated in, but this was commanded by parents in both situations. First, it was Rebekah telling Jacob what to do, and now it's Jacob, many years later. Jacob is taking part in another deception, but he's the one that's being deceived this time. Interesting. Jacob probably right now thinks, well, back then he would think the end justifies the means, so he went ahead and participated in the deception that Rebekah planned, his mom. Now, maybe Leah and Laban felt the same way, and this case happened a lot later. Very possible. But anyway, Jacob confronts Laban, and Laban gives his response, which no doubt he has already rehearsed and practiced. And I started to say practice in front of a mirror. I doubt they had a mirror. But he practiced giving that speech. Wow, we can't give the oldest daughter, we can't let the younger daughter get married before the older daughter. That's not the way it's done here. So he proposed a bargain. Here's his bargain. I mean, this guy, this Laban is some kind of character. You got to watch him. He's going to come out ahead in order that even somebody else may have to suffer, but he's going to come out ahead. So if Jacob would fulfill the wedding week of festivities for Leah, now it's the next morning, Jacob's mad, he goes and tells his father-in-law, reads in the Riot Act, and so, what have you done to me? Why have you played this trick on me? And he said, well, that's because the older daughter has to be married first before the younger daughter can get married. Oh, but the plan by Laban that he offered Jacob was, if you'll fulfill her wedding week, let's go ahead with all the week-long 7 days of festivities regarding marriage. Then I'll give you Rachel at that point. Just 1 week later, instead of another 7 years of work, you can have Rachel as your second wife. So in essence, he is forcing Jacob to become a bigamist. That's the blunt reality of it. That was not a serious problem, evidently, way on back, as we've been noticing. Because, for example, in the Christian age, this would be bad. Probably there'd be a lawsuit involved. Society would look down upon him in our dispensation today, but not so then, because polygamy, many marriages, polygamy was very common. Now, Jacob's own brother had 2 wives at the same time, Esau, so there's a polygamist. And what about his grandpa, Abraham? Not only did he have Sarah as his wife, but he had the concubine, Hagar, and had children by her. So it's not all that unusual. Now that doesn't make it right, as I want to be expressing that very quickly, but notice what that caused. It's going to mean that problems are going to develop from this situation. And, they developed. Heartache. I mean, all the way back from Abraham and Sarah, and taking Hagar and treating Hagar's boy, Ishmael, he kicked them out of the family. Do we have problems today with Israelites and Arabs? Dates back centuries, doesn't it? It's been going on for centuries. And really for us to think that we could change it by our own mental prowess is rather naive. This is many, many centuries. We're talking about 3,500 years ago when some of these things happen. It causes family problems, and it did. But notice the promise was, and this was a deal that he offered to Jacob, and Jacob accepted it, mind you, that he would have 1 week from now, he'll be able to have Rachel as his wife, the one he wanted in the first place. 1 week later, after the week-long festivities for Leah. But isn't it interesting that the work arrangements were different? He had to work 7 years to get his first wife, who was supposed to be Rachel. Turned out it wasn't. 7 years of labor, and then that father-in-law of his came up with the idea, I can get probably seven more years out of labor for the younger one. He is what we would call a conniver. He is really conniving. Now, one thing that I want to mention that's different about the two situations, he worked 7 years for Leah and then was given her as a wife. After 1 week, he got the second wife, which really means that he has agreed to work another 7 years for Rachel, which means he's getting Rachel on the installment plan. That's not the way it was with Leah, but now 1 week later, Rachel becomes his wife also. Verse 31. And when the Lord saw, and of course the Lord knew this, he didn't just happen to see it. I mean, this is a way that it's being written down by evidently Moses, but when the Lord observed the situation, Leah was hated. Underline that word. What that really means is, as we've already noticed, loved less. He loved her less than he did Rachel. But because of her not having any children, and this is a tremendously important point. I mean, people wanted children, men wanted children so badly in those days that it was looked upon as a disgrace if the woman was sterile or could not have children. And that's what happened with Rachel. She couldn't have children. But Leah could. Verse 31. Rachel was barren, and Leah was the one having children. Verse 32, she conceived, and notice very quickly in rapid fire succession. Verse 32, Reuben was born, son number 1. In verse 33, Simeon was born. 34, Levi. 35, Judah. Now, people, this didn't just happen. We're talking here about 9 months plus. A few weeks or months, but anyway, 9 months, 4 children. We're talking about some time lapse here. But all this time, we find Leah resenting the fact that Rachel is the one he loves, not me. So this is ongoing for years. And so the word hate here literally means he loved Rachel more. And he slighted or loved less Leah, the older child. I've written down the children that are involved here because Leah had 6 children. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, and then Issachar and Zebulun. But between her 4 and Issachar and Zebulun, we find that Rachel, still barren, but she wants to have children also. That's important. So important that she says, Jacob, I want you to take my handmaid Bilhah and have a child or children by her. Sound familiar? How about Sarah? Abraham? Evidently, God's not able to give me a child. Let me bear a child. Therefore, you take my handmaid Hagar and have a child by her. Here, some 80 or 90 years later, it's going on, still going on. But you have Dan and Naphtali, and then we find that the daughter Leah gets upset because she's not able to have children either. So if Jacob's going to have a child or two by Bilhah, I'm going to offer him my handmaid Zilpah, and she can have children with Jacob, and they'll be my children. And so Gad and Asher were born. Now the children are adding up. That's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 10 children. That doesn't happen in just a short period of time. I think the minimum would have to be around 13 years at least. And I say that because with all of those that are born, it's possible that some of them were expecting at the same time. Some of the handmaids at the same time one of the others was expecting. So probably 13 or more years for all of this to transpire. And yet, only one that I want to call attention to of this bunch is Leah's child number 4. That was Judah. What do we know about Judah? Well, because you know what's going to happen in the future. That's why this is important. He's the one that God intends to one day bring the Messiah into the world. He's in the line going all the way back to Abraham. The promise was made in Genesis 12. It was renewed to Isaac, but it was renewed to Jacob too. Same promise. In you, all nations of the earth are going to be blessed. Jacob knew that. And that person was, as we know now, it was Judah. Now this is about 1,750 years before the time of Christ. So we've got a lot of history between now and then. Most of it, what happened is not recorded. But let's go to chapter 30, Genesis chapter 30, verse 1. When Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel and Jacob didn't have any children, she envied her sister, and she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I die." I mean, that's how important it was to her. I've got to have children. She tells this to Jacob, now her husband. Jacob was angry. He was very upset with Rachel. And he said, "Am I in God's stead, who hath withheld you the fruit of the womb?" And Rachel says to Jacob, "Look, Jacob, behold, my handmaid Bilhah. Take her and have a child by her." I don't know what that phrase means exactly, whether it's figurative or literal. Some say that she shall bear upon my knees. Some say that's literal because evidently she was laying down in Rachel's lap when that boy was born to Bilhah. Possibly. But I tend to believe that it's just a figurative term instead of literal. And it's a figurative term simply meaning having children in general, that she's able to have a child. But anyway, is that the first bell? Second. Okay. I don't want to get into, we'll stop right here about Genesis 30 and verse 14. Genesis 30 and verse 14. And we'll pick up this issue of mandrakes, a flower that Reuben come across out there in the field, and he knew his mom loved him, and so he picked her a bouquet of mandrake flowers. That caused problems. We'll learn about that next week.
You're early, aren't you? Hope you're doing better here. Just a little bit. How are you doing this morning? I'm trying. Doing okay. Good. Same hand up as well. I did mine also. Did mine to the cycle bar. Yeah. You still have to graduate. I didn't say a word. Oh, yeah.
So we got
Still improves. She's doing all right. She got out Moses. Oh, I said, are you sure you can do this? She was looking at my list and said, I can't do this, this, and this. It don't say anything about more. Okay. So, she got a zero turn. Took off. Because I said she voted. She voted here. She voted everywhere I was trying to work. That's where she voted. Not yet. She's got a few more days. This one here is faded away. Hope so. Yeah, she does call you every mother.
Hi, boss.
How are you? How's your wife doing?